A quiet summer night at Euclid Beach Park was supposed to end like any other. Instead, it became the scene of a tragedy that forever changed multiple families. What started as a brief argument between a group of young people quickly turned into a burst of gunfire that left one man dead, another fighting for his life, and a community searching for answers. The man responsible would eventually stand before a judge, but one question remained. How did such a small confrontation escalate into a deadly crime? This is the case of Christopher Manning and the fatal shooting that claimed the life of 20-year-old Jarvis Perryman. July 3, 2025, was a warm summer evening in Cleveland, Ohio. Like many nights during the holiday week, people gathered with friends and family to enjoy the outdoors. Euclid Beach Park, located along the shore of Lake Erie, is usually known as a peaceful place where people can relax, enjoy the scenery, and spend time together. But after the park had officially closed, a group of young people remained inside. Among them was 20-year-old Jarvis Perryman. He was with relatives, including a 17-year-old family member. There was no indication that anyone expected the night to end in violence. It was simply another gathering among young people enjoying the evening. At some point, Christopher Manning crossed paths with the group. According to investigators, a brief verbal argument broke out. Authorities have never publicly explained exactly what caused the disagreement, and that detail remains unknown. What is known is that the argument lasted only a short time before the situation suddenly became deadly. Instead of walking away, prosecutors said Manning reached into his backpack and pulled out a handgun. Within moments, he opened fire on the group. Panic immediately spread through the park. Witnesses heard multiple gunshots as people ran in every direction, trying to escape. When the shooting stopped, Jarvis Perryman had been struck by gunfire. His 17-year-old relative had also been seriously wounded. Emergency responders rushed to the scene. Despite every effort to save him, Jarvis Perryman died from his injuries. The teenager survived but suffered severe gunshot wounds that would leave lasting physical and emotional scars. For the Perryman family, everything changed in an instant. A young man with his entire future ahead of him was gone because of a confrontation that lasted only moments. As first responders secured the crime scene, investigators from Cleveland Metroparks Police began collecting evidence. Every shell casing, every witness statement, and every available surveillance camera became important pieces of the investigation. Detectives interviewed everyone they could find who had been at the park that night. Witnesses described what they had seen during the argument and the moments leading up to the gunfire. Investigators also reviewed surveillance footage from nearby cameras and collected physical evidence from the scene. As the investigation progressed, authorities identified Christopher Manning as the suspected shooter. Law enforcement gathered enough evidence to connect him to the deadly attack, leading to his arrest. A Cuyahoga County grand jury later returned an indictment against Manning. He faced some of the most serious criminal charges available under Ohio law, including aggravated murder, attempted murder, felonious assault, and firearm-related offenses. If convicted at trial on the most serious charges, he faced the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. As the case moved through the court system, both prosecutors and defense attorneys prepared for what could have been a lengthy trial. Prosecutors believed the evidence showed that Manning intentionally escalated a brief argument into deadly violence by pulling a firearm from his backpack and shooting at the group. Rather than taking the case before a jury, Manning eventually entered into a plea agreement with prosecutors. By pleading guilty to the charges resolved under the agreement, he avoided the uncertainty of a trial and the possibility of facing an even harsher sentence. One of the most significant issues throughout the legal proceedings was Manning's documented mental health history. His attorneys argued that his mental health should be considered when determining an appropriate sentence. Prosecutors acknowledged those documented issues, and court records indicate that they played a role in the plea negotiations. However, prosecutors also emphasized the devastating consequences of the shooting. One young man had lost his life. Another young victim had survived with serious injuries. Multiple families would continue living with the emotional pain caused by those few seconds of violence.
Your Honor, I'm standing here today as a mother who is hurting in a way.
With a metal plate, screws in his foot, and scars that will remain with him for the rest of his life.
Speak about my child's life being taken away. A mother is supposed to watch her child grow, see his dreams come true.
That had been taken away. Victim impact statements are often among the most emotional parts of any criminal case because they remind everyone in the courtroom that behind every legal document and every piece of evidence is a real family dealing with unimaginable loss. Defense attorneys asked Judge Stephen Gall to impose a sentence closer to the minimum allowed under the plea agreement. They argued that Manning had accepted responsibility by pleading guilty and pointed to his documented mental health struggles as factors deserving consideration. Prosecutors disagreed. They asked the judge to impose the maximum sentence available under the negotiated plea agreement. They argued that the seriousness of the crime, the loss of Jarvis Perryman's life, and the injuries suffered by the surviving victim justified the harshest punishment allowed. Judge Stephen Gall carefully considered both sides before announcing his decision. The judge noted that Manning's mental health had already been taken into account during the plea negotiations that spared him from potentially facing a sentence of life without parole if convicted on the most serious charges at trial. While acknowledging those circumstances, Judge Gall ultimately concluded that the violence of the crime required the maximum sentence available under the agreement. Christopher Manning was sentenced to an indefinite prison term of 32 to 37 years under Ohio's Reagan Tokes law. Unlike traditional prison sentences, Reagan Tokes law creates both a minimum and maximum prison term for certain felony offenses. In Manning's case, the minimum sentence was set at 32 years, while the maximum could extend to 37 years depending on how the law is applied during his incarceration. For the Perryman family, the sentence marked the end of the criminal case but not the end of their grief. No courtroom decision could undo what happened that summer night. The case also served as another reminder of how quickly arguments can turn deadly when firearms are involved. According to investigators, the confrontation lasted only a short time before shots were fired. A disagreement that might have ended with people simply walking away instead resulted in one death, another life permanently altered, and multiple families forever changed. The investigation highlighted the importance of witness cooperation, physical evidence, and surveillance footage in helping detectives identify the suspect and build the case. Those pieces of evidence allowed prosecutors to move forward and ultimately secure a conviction through the plea agreement. Although the legal process has now concluded, the emotional impact continues for everyone connected to the case. Jarvis Perryman's family continues to remember a son whose life ended at just 20 years old. The surviving victim must continue recovering from both physical injuries and emotional trauma. Friends and loved ones are left with memories of a night they wish had never happened. Cases like this also raise broader conversations about conflict resolution, mental health, and gun violence. While the courts focused on determining criminal responsibility, communities continue asking how tragedies like this can be prevented before they happen. One brief argument, one decision to pull a gun, a few seconds of violence. Those moments forever changed countless lives. Christopher Manning ultimately accepted responsibility through a plea agreement rather than taking the case to trial. His documented mental health history was considered during the legal proceedings, but the court determined that the seriousness of the crime warranted the maximum sentence allowed under the agreement. Judge Stephen Gall sentenced Manning to an indefinite prison term of 32 to 37 years. While the sentence brought the criminal case to a close, it could never restore the life of Jarvis Perryman or erase the suffering endured by the surviving victim and their family. Today, the case stands as a tragic reminder of how quickly violence can destroy lives and how the consequences of a single decision can last forever. Thank you for watching this documentary. Cases like this remind us of the devastating impact that violence has on victims, families, and entire communities. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more true crime stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next case.